I found a really interesting Twitter thread regarding the Pokemon anime a while back, and specifically it was about like Misty and the Togepi, because there was this big push initially that like Ash had the egg, Ash took care of it, they took care of it together, and then the egg hatched, and Misty was first to see it. It saw Misty first, and then it was like Misty's Pokemon from then on. So a lot of people had this discussion that like, well, did Misty actually deserve it or not? Was it like Ash's, or like, again, it's like it was a really interesting conversation because it made me think about like how I felt about like the Charmander episode, because I was kind of surprised going back on it because I remembered it quite a bit differently than it actually is, because everyone knows the Charmander episode. They're walking along the road, they see Charmander, Ash tries to catch it, and then like they realize that like it has a trainer already, and they're just like, well, I don't want to. We don't want to leave it here, but like if it's sure it wants to wait, okay, fine. Its trainer will come back for it. So they go on ahead, meet the trainer who's bragging about having abandoned it, and it's Brock who stands up to him. It's Brock who really worries about Charmander. It's Brock who's really concerned about Charmander's safety. And like everyone else kind of gets dragged along with him, like getting involved in this, and eventually start agreeing with him and decide to go out and like rescue Charmander. And then like they take care of it and they worried about it. Like, and Brock's the one who's like more in focus in that episode. Like it's mostly about him in that sense, where he's the one who's like has the most experience. He's the one who like knows the most about Pokemon. He's the oldest. He's like kind of I hate to say the leader of the group, but like he's the one who's like kind of leading the initiative. And in the end, it's like Ash who catches Charmander. In the end, it's Ash who raises Charmander, and it becomes one of his best Pokemon. So like a lot of people have this mindset that like, well, why didn't Brock get the Charmander? Why wasn't it Brock's Pokemon? And I think the simple answer to that is that like, well, it's not about ownership, really. Because Brock wasn't going out there to, like, get a Pokemon or catch, make Charmander his own or anything. Like, for him, helping Charmander was just something that he had to do because it was the right thing, and he served as, like, a moral compass for Ash, who helped him along the way, like, raise Charmander into the Pokemon it was. Like, Brock was just a good person who influenced Ash to do the right thing. Like, who was there to, like, kind of push Ash in the right direction. It was because of Brock that Ash got Charmander and made it as good of a Pokemon as it is. And I do think that's kind of, like, something that we do have to talk about in life, is that, like, it's not necessarily about, like, us getting things that are like perceived as valuable. Like sometimes you do things because it's the right thing to do and other people benefit from it, but like that doesn't matter because you still did the right thing. Like obviously Brock going out there saving Charmander, going to such insane lengths, that was obviously a good thing. And the simple fact that like he didn't directly get anything out of it, that's completely worthless. That doesn't mean anything. Brock helped Charmander because he wanted to, because he was fundamentally a good person, because he was a Chad, and he understood that Ash, being a trainer who wanted to catch Charmander to begin with, would be the best person to capture and raise it. And Brock called it. So not only does Ash, like, take Charmander and, like, actually take care of it and raise it well, like, Charmander goes on to, like, be one of Ash's best Pokemon, because of Brock, because of what Brock did, not only for Charmander, but in giving Ash the chance to raise this Pokemon that he clearly grew to care about, Like, Brock understood that not everything is about him. And I think that's kind of the mentality when it comes to, like, ownership of things or, relationships. Obviously, we're talking about Pokemon here, so it's kind of weird. But like, like the idea is Charmander is something that like ended up with Ash because of circumstances, because of just like what Brock thought was best at the time, and it all worked out for the best, for everyone. One of the most all-time iconic Pokemon, Charizard, happened because of Brock being a good person, essentially. And I do think this is why Pokemon has gone on to be such like an iconic show, way better than anything else in the 2000s, because it does such a great job having these kind of like nuanced situations, right? It's not just about like some guy abandoning his Charmander. It's about like how the characters react to it. It's about how Brock rises to the occasion. It's about him like taking responsibility for something that has nothing to do with him. It's about everyone else like getting wrapped in it and like learning from it and like kind of growing as a result as people. And the thing about the Pokemon anime is that it's very interesting. You don't necessarily notice how the characters change over time. A lot of people watch the Pokemon anime and then all of a sudden like Misty's taking care of Togepi and is a lot more like affectionate and giving, and it's like, when did this happen? What happened to her feistiness, like her initial personality? People thought she kind of regressed as a character, but no, she grew as a person, and like they all do in their own ways, right? Ash by the end of the series is like like a Pokemon master, which is something that like I don't think anybody really expected from him early on, right? Like when he couldn't even like catch that Pidgey, right? And again, it's interesting like what a great show this actually is when you really think like about how it's able to like incorporate aspects like this. When it's able to like create such organic, natural friendships. When it's able to like show how Brock is able to like guide people through his actions and not necessarily what he says. How much of Ash's Pokemon mastery can be attributed to Brock specifically, because it was Brock who like taught Ash to care for his Pokemon. It was Brock who was there the most. It was Brock who guided him on his journey to become a Pokemon master. And it was Brock, by the time Brock left, Ash was, a much more like talented, worldly trainer, at that point. So again, it's very, very interesting to see how these discussions kind of arise and then kind of like seeing how we kind of react to it. Because, really, in a lot of ways, it's up to interpretation. But I do think this idea that like the story is faulty or that there's something wrong with it or that it shouldn't turn out this way, I think the fact that we're talking about it like I believe 30 years later really goes to show you just how amazing of a sequence it actually was. This is probably one of the most well-known episodes in Pokemon history, and there's a good reason for it. Like, it's such an amazing concept that really encompasses the soul of Pokemon.